Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Just in case you are here by accident, this is the epic 12 days of sourcing recap. So all of those hacks, tips, and tricks that you received leading up to Christmas are being compiled into a demo style webinar by none only than Brian. Hey Brian, how are you?
I'm good. What's going on, Ashley?
Oh, I just wanted to put you on the spot for a second there. I know you weren't expecting that.
I wasn't expecting that at all, but I'm excited about our webinar. I'm excited about our sponsor, and we're going to have some fun today.
Yes, this is going to be so much fun. We've been so excited about this. So while everybody is logging on, we'll just go ahead and go over the housekeeping. If you don't mind switching over to that housekeeping slide, Brian, that would be great.
Cool.
Cool. So the plan. You are in listen only mode. That means that you can hear us, but we cannot hear you. But we ask that this please not stop you from asking questions. Don't be shy. Use that questions panel in your sidebar to speak with Brian or Joe, who is here with us from Gym today. We are live. Please use the #RDaily hashtag to share all over social media. Just because we've started does not mean that people cannot go ahead and join. And you will receive a copy of the slide deck and the recording after the webinar. This one's probably very, very important because we're going to cover a ton of material and you'll want to review. So with us today is Jim. They made the entire 12 days of sourcing campaign possible. We have Joe Totten here with us today who will introduce Jim and tell you a little bit about themselves. Here, let me switch over to Joe. We're swapping screens, so there will be just a second pause here.
All right, I'm here with you, Ashley.
Thank you so much for being here. We're so excited about this. We really, really appreciate everything and this has been so much fun.
You got it. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm such a fan of Brian as well. So I'm honored to be a part of this. And thanks for a little airtime here to just share a little bit about GEM. As Ashley mentioned, my name is Joe Totten. I'm our VP of Sales here at GEM, formerly known as Zen Sourcer. At a high level, GEM automates the manual and tedious work that goes into sourcing. You can really think of us as replacing your tracking spreadsheets, reach out templates, and calendar reminders while tying together LinkedIn, email, and your ATS. Our core workflow allows you to source from LinkedIn in one click, find email addresses for candidates, upload to your ATS, and reach out over email with automated follow-ups, all without ever leaving the LinkedIn tab. So all in, GEM doubles your conversion to initial phone screen and saves 4x the time. So think of us as a way that if you put your headphones on and source for a given period of time, you're just going to see more output, more results for that period. And because everything is tracked in one place, GEM gives you analytics into what's working. So you can test things like subject lines, templates, and even time of day. We've been around for less than 2 years, but we're already partnering with hundreds of top recruiting teams. I would imagine no matter who you are, whatever space you work in, you recognize at least some of these logos. And one thing that I'll call out here is that each of these companies has a full enterprise rollout of GEM to their entire recruiting team. So if you know someone on one of these teams and you want to get an honest assessment from a user of whether we make their job easier and make them more productive, I suggest you reach out. And I think more than likely than not, you're going to hear good things about our team and our product. These customers, as I mentioned, they're saying great things. The common theme here among all of our customers and the feedback that they share is that reducing time spent sourcing, getting better, deeper insight into the state of the entire recruiting funnel, and gaining that ability to manage these passive relationships over time in a more automated way. So one of the promises I try to make here is no more spreadsheets and no more manual data entry. We're super excited to partner with Recruiting Daily and with Brian on the webinar today. Beyond sourcing, keep your eyes on us over in the future. Our long-term vision and direction is talent CRM and source of truth. And those are things that we've got a lot of really talented folks working on every day. So please do drop me a line if you'd like to learn more. We'll send it back to Brian and Ashley.
Hey, real quick, I've got one quick question about GEM. The one thing that I'm going to sit here and I'm going to plug for a second, Joe. I know that you weren't very pitchy, but isn't there a free extension that I can download that I can kind of use to kind of find out more about my candidates, even if I'm not a subscriber to GEM?
Yeah. So there's a free trial to GEM that folks can hit just on the website at gem.com, and that allows you to test some of the basic workflows in GEM, like finding an email address, sending that email campaign, even connecting up to your ATS to do dupe checks and pass the person through into the ATS, and get that picture of like the social media presence online. So Brian, you and I met each other back in the day when I was at a product called Connectifier.
Yep.
GEM is sort of the natural extension of that direction, so giving you more visibility on top of the profile.
Cool. Very cool. All right.
This is
I think
awesome. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
no, I was like, I think we're ready to rock and roll. Let's get fired up.
Let's do it. So thank you so much, Joe. Thank you, Jim, for being here. The no more spreadsheets has me won completely. That's all it took for me. So thank you for this. Okay, Brian, we are going to give this over to you. This is Brian Fink of RibPath, and now you're on the spot. You must introduce yourself and give everybody the show of the year.
Show of the year. So hey
Show
everybody,
of the year.
show of the year. My name is Brian Fink. I am a senior technical recruiter with RentPath in Atlanta, Georgia. One of the things that I get to do, and I get to do this with Ashley all the time, is I travel around the country with Recruiting Daily as part of their HRTX seminars and educational, like day-on full court press events. I've really had the pleasure the past year to train about 2,000 recruiters on how to do things, kind of take their skill set to the next level. And I think that's one of the things that GEM is really making possible for us today, is that we're going to go through 12 days of sourcing. We're going to go through a lot of the tips and tricks that we went through. If you've got a question, stop me. I will be more than happy to kind of slow down. There are about 57 slides. So if you're watching your clock, that means I'm going to be spending about a minute or so per slide. I'm going to try not to go too fast, and I'm going to try to be a gracious host to you today. As we talk about a host, 12 days of sourcing wouldn't be possible without GEM, but it also wouldn't be possible without these great recruiters and sourcers, people who we stand on their shoulders. They're really the forefathers, the innovators in recruiting today. Those are people like Ronnie Bratcher, Dean DaCosta, Aaron Matthew, Balaz, the man, the myth, the legend, the godfather of sourcing, Shally, and of course, Ryan Leary as well. So would not be able to do this today without their insights, without their education, without what they've really imbued upon us and upon this community. And with that, before we begin, I think it's important for us to cover just a little bit of Boolean, because this is going to be, I'd say, Ashley, would you say maybe about 50% of the webinar is going to be pretty Boolean intensive?
I would say so.
Yes. So if there's a Boolean question, there are no stupid questions. We're here to answer that. We're here to educate. Just real simple, the Boolean that I'm going through today is I'm going to be using the and, or, not, so that I can include terms, so that I can exclude terms, and so that I can expand my terms. I will also be using exact phrase matching. I'll particularly be using that when we do a little bit of natural language search, which again, pioneered by Shally Stackrell, so I'm excited to talk about that. Nesting, which is when you're going to put multiple terms together. Wildcards, I like to use multiple wildcards so that if I don't know what the word is that I am looking for on a page, that I can come as close as possible to that word in maybe when I'm doing an in title or in URL lookup. As I mentioned, in title and in URL, those are two terms that you can use seamlessly as search operators on Gigablast or on Google or on DuckDuckGo or Bing. And I'm going to highlight Bing there for a quick second, because if you're doing site command searches for GitHub or for LinkedIn, you'll notice that you're getting much better results than what you commonly would refer to as getting a result on Google. So just kind of want to throw out Bing there, even though everybody seems to have forgotten about Bing. Don't forget about Bing. Don't forget about Dre. Don't forget about Bing. We are also looking at file types that you might be able to pull back. Those would be Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, PowerPoints, and PDFs. And we can also use the extension modifier to, Google Dork to bring back those type of file types for us. So that's just a little bit of Boolean before we begin. If you want, I'm going to leave this up here for just another second, let you take a screenshot. Even though you are going to be receiving the slides, I think it's helpful to maybe have this as a companion as we go through some of the Boolean that we're going to be doing today. Now about this Boolean, first thing that we're going to come to is natural language search or keywordless search. There's three important things for you to know is that people typically overcomplicate their search. Just because in Google you can type in less than 40 keywords doesn't mean that you should use 36 keywords. Also, forget the basics. Don't worry about what you're doing beyond and, nor, and not. Never forget the basics. Stick with those and then build your search like you talk. One of the things that I like to do when I'm teaching people to find developers on alternative social networks like Airbnb or on Hacker News is that you've got the option to put in quotation marks things like I'm a developer or I'm a nurse, and it can bring you back those terms of how people introduce themselves. So as we talk about how people introduce themselves, I want to focus on how you might find an engineer. The task that we're given is that we're going to find an engineer that maybe has outgrown their position. Maybe they're looking for leadership. Particularly, they have a background in all things technical, which would mean if we're looking at a job description or having a meeting with the hiring team, as I like to say, not just having a conversation with the hiring manager, it's going to be a pretty keyword-rich environment. You might be looking for who knows, you might be looking for a React JS engineer, and you might be looking for JavaScript and React and hooks and a lot of other keywords that would maybe be found on that resume. However, we're not always looking for resumes. So looking for every keyword under the sun, that may not be relevant. We also want to make sure that this engineer, because you know how hiring managers are, they want to throw a lot of requirements to us. We're looking for somebody who has a business background, who's had the management or people management responsibilities, where they've managed about 20 or more people in a group that exceeds about $15 million in revenue, right? So as we talk about that, I want to say, let's skip the keywords for a second and the silly jargon. What we're skipping here is those words like React or Redux or hooks that we would be looking for, words that would indicate their skill set or their level. We know that this person has come up through the ranks of the organization, that they may not have those words on their LinkedIn profile. Instead, we might want to focus on company size, so we can focus on those organizations that either have the revenue that we're looking for or have the people responsibilities that we're looking for, so that we know that this person has the authority to oversee that type of revenue target. So when we're building the search, and it's really funny because I was having a conversation last night with Ari Waller, who's over at JFrog, about search and looking for, and we did a role play. And for a minute, I'd like you to kind of put your hat on where you're saying, what would it be like if you were going to have a conversation with a candidate and say to the candidate, hey, can you give me a 2-minute snapshot about who you are and what you're about? Can you tell me what you're responsible for? Candidate, we're expecting them to say that that they manage a group of about $15 million, of about 30 engineers that's focused on design and product research. Just how they would introduce themselves at a dinner party. Maybe at a dinner party, they're not going to say, I manage a $15 million budget, but who knows, right? So instead, we want to build this search as if we're transcribing the conversation word by word with our ideal candidate. So for instance, going back to how they would introduce themselves at a cocktail party, I manage or oversee or lead, close the nesting, an engineer or engineers or engineering, close parentheses, open parentheses, a group or department or business in quotation marks, and then close quotes, and then open quotes for revenue or revenues, close quotes, open quotes, 15 or 10 or 20 or 30, because we know that our hiring manager is looking for that person who specifically has had that $10 million worth of revenue experience, and then million or millions in our final bracket. So as we go through that search and we generate that, we've got about 27 million results. So no worries, no problem. Everybody's got plenty of time to go through that. We're going to narrow that down just a little bit. Actually, I'm going to go back for a quick second and say, look, we were able to find out people who built $15 million businesses, people who had run as an engineer, people who had that ability as an engineer or business development manager on their resume. So that got us somewhere, but it didn't get us as close to the fire as we needed to get. So let's narrow that search with a little more Boolean. And I'm going to use the in title command to say that I'm looking in the title of the page, or in URL that I'm looking for inside the URL, the word resume. I'm going to put that at the beginning of our search string. And when I do that, I come back with about 17,000 results, which still is not really a manageable number for us to cut through. And if you'll notice, we're also getting a lot of people who here are samples, are resume samples, and that's not what we're looking for. So let's go ahead and let's use some negative terminology and get rid of sample, get rid of resume writer, and get rid of example of. And we'll put that at the end of our search string, again, being mindful of how many keywords we actually have in that string. We come back with about 5,000 results, talking to us about Niana Wang, who led an engineering group who helped grow revenues by 20x, tens of millions of dollars in revenue. We've got Steve Longerman, who was in business development, boosted revenues from 200,000 to more than 20 million in 3 years. But you get the idea, is that we're using that natural language search, we're able to kind of dial in beyond, quote unquote, the keywords of the resume, that we're able to find out in a much more complete fashion the individual that we're looking for that comports with most of our hiring manager qualifications. Real quick, I just want to see if there are any questions that I might want to answer or that you might need answered about natural language search.
Yes, please. And if you do have any that come up later, let me know and I'll make sure to pass those along to Brian. We're good right now though, Brian. Everything has been very, very clear. So.
All right. So you know, about where we are, the next day or adventure that we're going on is finding conference attendees. And this is, you know, Balazs really contributed to this. He came up with some really inventive ideas through the email. One of the other people that I recommend that you take a look at who is really good at finding conference attendees, if you're not following Steve Levy or Recruiting Inferno, you might want to go there and kind of take a look at what he's putting out and the content that he's got around how to find candidates, as well as Balazs, because they're both really extraordinary at this feat. So what we want to do is we want to be able to drive candidate engagement. And candidate engagement is, the way that we drive candidate engagement is if we know who attended a conference, we can speak to different topics that were discussed at that conference. It also affords us the opportunity to really get into niche profiles and kind of find secret participants. Secret participants, those would be the individuals who maybe led sessions or were mic runners or facilitated the conversation in a way. And again, the best candidates are typically the speakers at these events. So we've got 5 search strings that we're going to take apart one by one, and we're going to look to see how we can find these attendees lists. The first instance we're going to use is we're going to use site colon, and we know that if we do that, that we're looking specifically at one particular site. So we're going to look at mgma.com, and in the URL, we're going to look for attendees, and we're specifically looking for nurses. So if we take that drive there, well, we'll get to that in just a quick second. We'll be able to find those individuals that attended that conference. We've got about 7 results that we can go through pretty quickly. If we'll notice, we've got a roster of attendees that's available as a PDF. So if you're looking for names of attendees who attended the conferences, we're looking for their email address. If we're looking for their phone number, we've got that information that's readily available, and gratefully it's a PDF, so we can download that pretty quickly. Consequently, the next search that we would jump to is using file type. File type again says, hey, I specifically wanted you to bring back files that were saved that were Excel documents, XLS, or DOC for documents, or PDF for PDFs, or PPT for PowerPoint. And in the title, we're going to look for attendees, and we're going to add medical as well. We got 2 Excel documents that came back that look like they're listing for us names of individuals like Alana Zdanka as the Global Marketing Director for Springer Healthcare. And if you'll notice the word healthcare and the word health, those are not words that we had initially in our search. Instead, Google is smart enough to say the word medical is a synonym for healthcare and health. So think about that, and also reducing the keywords that you're going to use. Additionally, I suggested using the extension PDF previously on that slide, so that you could be able to find PDFs or Excel documents or Word docs. I'm going to do that here, and I'm looking to find PDFs using in-URL conference to specifically find the listing of conferences. And I'm looking for last names, first names that exist in healthcare, right? So we've got that instance where we were able to come up with a PDF that gave us our names, our last names, our first names, what their credentials were. In this instance, it's letting us know who's a CPA, who's a SHRM CPA, what their job title is, where they're located, and what their full-time employee headcount is, and what company they're associated with or they might be managing. So we can use that to find conference attendees. Also, we don't have to do any complicated Boolean. We could just say attendees, name, email address, phone number, title, and my personal favorite, looking for Gmail addresses, and put Gmail in quotation marks, so that what it does is it brings us back an Excel document that contains people who have email addresses, but also particularly had some Gmail addresses here. So we were able to find that pretty quickly. And then also using in-title conference, that we were looking for that conference name to be on the page. Medical delegate list, people who attended, named Joe, John, and Maria. And this brings us back, and unfortunately this slide's a little blurry, but it does bring us back Joe's, John's, and Maria. One of the reasons why I included the slide, however, is that we probably don't do this enough, and this is a trick that I actually learned from Irina, is that you can look for images of resumes or images of lists down below without having to go through all the different pages. It also works really well if you just type in the word resume instead of delegate list, to be able to find those resumes that are held up as images. All right, great. Moving on to our next find, if you will, is the Wayback Machine. I have loved this website since I discovered it in 2011. It allows me to find information that isn't necessarily a cached page, but is a page that existed in another form. So with this on our tip 3, our day 3, with the Wayback Machine, what we're doing is we're able to put in a URL, and I like to use this again to find conferences, to find the speakers who are at conferences, especially if it's a conference that's reoccurring. For instance, the example that we're going to use here is the Cornerstone Convergence Conference. I'm sure that everybody's received an email about this before to sign up. It's really bringing together great recruiters, HR, thought practitioners, really to exchange beautiful ideas about what's next in HR and in talent acquisition. This is a website from just a few days ago for their conference that's coming up in May. But if I wanted to see who were speakers at their conference in 2016 or 2013, I could simply go in and put in cornerstoneconvergence.com, and actually I guess it goes far back enough to 2009 when the conference started, and I can start looking at different iterations of the page. And so specifically, I'm going to dial in and look at Cornerstone's Convergence in 2013. And if I notice, it shows me the agenda, the session, the speakers, the sponsors, about, and social. This is a fully indexed website that we can go through as if we were in 2013. I'm glad that they've really updated their website for 2013. This is that's a little bit different than maybe what it looks like today. A little bit more relevant. And we can also go back and forth to when they held it in June of 2012, which is the next immediate date, or go forward to May 2014. Now, as long as we're talking about conferences, and I got to pick on Ashley because she reminded everybody they should be tweeting with R daily. Hashtags are an awesome way to search, and this will be our tip for day 4 or day 5. Day 4 or day 5. This is our tip for day 5, is that we can use hashtags to be able to look for software engineers, or my personal favorite when I was looking for Salesforce developers was Dreamforce 2019. So using those hashtags to be able to find them across Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, so that we can even find them across all these different messenger conversations. As long as we're talking specifically about hashtags on Twitter, I got to talk about hashtags on Instagram. I've kind of gotten a reputation of being the Instagram recruiter. One of my favorite places to go to find developers is github.com. If you are on Instagram, you can look for people who have posted links to code that they have shared on GitHub. Specifically, we have this Vibe Technologies that posted what was on their GitHub. Just because I recruit developers, I know that this is a little bit of JavaScript that we're working with here, and also some PHP, as we can notice up at the top. This is probably something that somebody was building for a WordPress site or a personal website. Now, Instagram, coming to our tip 7, is Instagram. One of the ways that I recruit on Instagram, and I think it's greatly overlooked, is the direct message or the DM. I take this from Gary Vaynerchuk, who is a world-renowned marketer, and he talks about slipping into the DMs. So what I've done is I've figured out that you can message about 20 people a day on Instagram. So if we're looking for a content marketer, which is a search that I did recently, we probably come up with a very simple search string that starts with looking specifically at Instagram, so site : Instagram, and then we would look for content marketer in quotes, or an inbound marketer, or a content writer, or somebody in demand generation, or a content marketer. And since this person can work remote, and I know that the advertising capital of the world is New York City, I'm going to look in New York, or I'm going to look in NYC. So it comes back with about 382 results. And if I'm being a lazy recruiter, and today I'm going to be a lazy recruiter, I'm looking only at the first page of results. And I've got a few different people that are here. I've got Gabby Tama, who is a New York City content writer for Bloomberg Business. That's interesting. I've got Sarah Goldfarb, who is a digital and content marketer for the New York City and Hamptons-based brands. Well, I'm not based in the Hamptons, so I'm out. And then I've got an agency which is located in New York. So I'm going to zap into Gabby Tama for just a quick second, and I've juxtaposed two different screenshots here. One, the larger screenshot is what Gabby's profile looks like if you're on desktop, and the smaller one is what it would look like if you're on mobile. So what's the difference? Is the 3 dots that exist on both mobile and desktop have different functionality. If you click on the 3 dots on desktop, it will drop you down a menu that you can report objectionable content. You can block this individual. You can do that as well when you pull down on the 3 dots that exist on Gabby Tama's Instagram profile. But one of the things that's really interesting is it produces the opportunity for you to send them a direct message. And like I said, you can send up to 20 direct messages at any time. If you send those direct messages, there's no guarantee that they're going to get back to you. But since there's no spam filter yet on Instagram, it's going to go directly into their mail folder there. So you'll have a greater chance, a greater propensity of beating any kind of spam filter because one doesn't exist, and having a conversation with up to about 20 candidates in a day. What happens if I try to message more than 20 candidates? Instagram's going to say, hold on, wait a minute, wait for somebody to get back to you. It'll flash that up for you. Now, this is particularly interesting as our day 8 hack is building a sourcing toolbox. And I really lean on 2 people, actually 3 people that I really think have shown how to build a sourcing toolbox. Erin Matthew wrote this for Recruiting Daily, and I think she would have no problem with me talking about that. There are other people like Dean who do a great job building a recruiting toolbox, and you can find more of his information on his Sasser pages, or possibly by following the likes of, oh wow, I'm going to talk about somebody and I totally forgot their name for a second. It'll come back to me in a quick second, but jumping in, I love when that happens, right? Like I can see his face, I can go to his YouTube channel whenever I want to, but I can't think of his name. But we're talking about building a toolbox that your entire team can reach into, and so that they can use alternative platforms, and so that you've got a collective sharing of this information. This information could be categories about tools for finding contact info if you're not using GEM, data extraction tools if you're not using GEM, talent communities and forums that are relevant to the role, like for instance, what Slack channels, and we're going to talk about Slack later, so we'll go into that in a minute. Pre-built Boolean searches that you commonly run, or ones that you may have set up to bring you back results. Different organizational tools, like for instance, my group here, we're real big proponents of using Slack as an organizational tool. But one of the other areas that we use to complement that is we use Trello, and then Google custom search engines, which if you've seen me on the road, you've seen me build those. I love building them. I think that, and maybe Ashley will let me come back on another webinar if I'm a good boy and show you guys how to build a Google custom search engine. Additionally, you may want to put together company programs and portals like your ATS, your CRM, your employee referral information so you can have it, or your benefits information so you have it at your fingertips. But really about this toolbox, and what Erin does really well is that she recommends 3 different services that you can use that are free, and she knows that's my favorite word, so that's why I'm going to use it again, free, for your recruiting necessities. There's start.me, which Dean uses for his, Google Sheets, which we're all kind of familiar with that, and how we can actually share different directories of Boolean search strings. I know that a lot of people do that. And then OneTab, which is a resource that up until mid-December, I wasn't familiar with. So let's kind of jump into start.me. Start.me, you can build or add and kind of gravitate towards building your pages. As you can see on the example that Erin has listed here, she has on the right-hand side of the screen GitHub search tools. We'll be going into a few of those. There were some of the lookups that we had for 12 days of sourcing. I about called it 7 days of sourcing. I'm way beyond that. Also different Chrome extensions that you can use that are listed here on the left, as well as some miscellaneous tools that are in the middle column, including Bebo, which it wasn't until that I went through this, I was like, Bebo still exists, and I was pretty excited that a tool that's been around ever since the dawn of AOL Instant Messenger is still pretty relevant in recruiting. This is actually a slide that shows the tools and tricks that she has for her team at Maxar, different ways that people can find very quick information about individuals. There's a link to Dean's Sasser page, as well as to the CSE Utopia. And there's Greg Hawks' name. I was trying to remember Greg. If you ever want to check out great recruiting videos on how to do the simplest things, the most complex things, check out Greg Hawks and check out his YouTube channel. It's really dynamic. It's somewhere that you're going to fall into, and you're going to spend a lot of time watching videos there. So those are different resources. Oh, I didn't even realize this until now, but there's my LinkedIn X-ray, and then there's my GitHub and Stack Overflow X-ray. Maybe we'll find a way to see how we can make that available to you guys today, because those are search engines that I really like to build so that I'm not, constantly rebuilding the world every time I'm looking for talent on Stack Overflow or GitHub. And Google Sheets, just an example here of what Google Sheets look like. I don't think I have to go too deep into Google Sheets. I think everybody, has experienced it in one form or another, either in their corporate setting or in their personal setting by using Google. And then finally, there's OneTab, right? So OneTab brings all of your tabs that you are working on into a shareable format. So let's say, for instance, that you've got 20 open tabs open, and who as a recruiter doesn't have 20 open tabs open at any given time, and that you can select those tabs that you want to bring back and you want to save where they are specifically as you're working on them. And that's OneTab, and that's part of Erin's toolkit. And if it wasn't for Erin, I wouldn't have found out about this tool. All right, searching GitHub. I'm going to take just a quick slap of coffee real quick. This is one of my.
And while you're taking, oh, do you mind if I interrupt you for a second, Brian?
Go for it. Let's have some fun.
Because I'm doing it anyway. Just so you know, I just wanted to let everybody know that I've shared a link to the trial that you and Joe talked about at the beginning of the webinar. It's sitting in the chat box. So check out your chat box, guys, and grab that link, and also send those questions over or save them up. Thanks, Brian.
Actually, as long as we're talking about chatbots, about the chat section, one thing that I want to do real quick is I want to. We were talking. Erin had this listed on her on her Maxar page, the Google custom search engine for LinkedIn. I am putting it in to the chat box right now, and it's going to be shared with everybody so that you guys can take a look at that. And that's a Google custom search engine that will allow you to really use a lot of the filters that quote unquote are paid filters on LinkedIn. If you click on it now, it's going to immediately take you to React, because I spend a lot of time looking on React. It'll also take you to GitHub, Stack Overflow, OpenHub, Kaggle, Launchpad, SourceForge, CoderWall, Hackathons, GitLab, Bitbucket, and a lot of different areas of the country and of the world that are technical hotbeds. So I hope everybody will enjoy that. That's what you get for showing up, as opposed to waiting for the slide deck to come to you, right? Now let's move on to day 9, is that we have searching GitHub. And searching GitHub, I think that there are 3 really good ways to do it. One is by jumping right into GitHub and using their search operators, which we're not going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how to hack GitHub and how to make it accessible and readable for anybody. And 2 of the ways that I do that are through Get Awards, that's git-awards.com, or OctoHunt. And when you go into Get Awards, you can search by top users in a city, country, or users worldwide. And if you're like me and you search either in Atlanta or you search by country for the best of the best, what you can simply do is put in JavaScript, Atlanta, and it brings you back people whose repositories have been starred, so you know those individuals that are the best of the best, right? You don't have to go through and be able to read code necessarily. You're able to discern very quickly who it is that you should be reaching out to. Like if your hiring manager says, I want the top 10% of developers that are in this market, great, go and look for the top 10% of developers that are here. Alternatively, there's OctoHunt, which OctoHunt, I've typed in React and I've typed in Atlanta here. It brings me back people based upon how many followers they have, how many repositories they have, how many gists they have. It allows me to go directly to their GitHub profile or to their personal homepage. And if you're logged into GitHub, you can automatically go there and extract their email address pretty easily. It's usually just right found on the page. One of the other areas, though, that wasn't covered in the 12 days of sourcing is one of my favorite tools, and somebody had a comment in the secret sourcing group on Facebook. Secret sourcing group is a open group, so it's not really a secret, that's open to recruiters, that's managed by Recruiting Daily. And they were talking specifically about finding AWS engineers that had certain certifications and also had Python. So if you go to awshof.com or AWS Hall of Fame, you can actually go into a directory and look up individuals that have the different qualifications that you're looking for, and it'll send you as a link to their LinkedIn profile. It's all self-reported. It's all self-reported. It's a great source of information. It is not updated regularly, so I would take that with a bit of salt. As long as we're talking about GitHub, though, Chrome extension, I learned this from the man, the myth, the legend, Dean DaCosta, is there's something that's called OctoHR. It is a free extension. You can go to your Google Chrome store and download this. What it will do is it will put down a little reader, if you will, and you can see that on the left-hand side of the screen, that will tell us what languages that individual is coding in, what most of their repositories are coded in, so that, again, we don't have to be developers to understand this. If you'll notice, it also has a pretty slick search interface that if you're on GitHub and you're running this, you can see it on the left-hand side of my screen. You can type in the location, the language you're looking for, and you can actually say how many repositories you want this person to have. So as we learned in our first example, that those people who contribute the most, instances to the open coding session, this will provide you with a really unique way to be able to sort out and say that you want to look at people who have so many public repositories or have so many followers. I'll give you an example of that, is that we're looking in Boston for people who have Python that have more than 100 repositories. Comes back with 36 users. I think that that's a pretty doable number of profiles to jump into. and a pretty doable number of people for you to communicate with and have a conversation with. That location is location : Boston in quotes, language : Python in quotes, repos : this is greater than 100. You also could do less than 100, but it goes ahead and it types in the quote unquote Boolean that is used inside of GitHub or their search operator, so you don't have to. All right, so we're coming upon the end here. I haven't seen any questions yet, but you know, if Jason Singer, my mentor, is here with us on the line, Jason, I would appreciate a question.
We have one for you. Would you like one? It'll take us back a little bit, so we can wait until the end, or if you're ready for one right now.
Oh, sure. What's the question?
Okay, so Mia says that she did try the first example of sourcing in Google, but it still pulls examples of resume rather than just resumes. So examples of resumes rather than the resumes themselves, I think is what she's saying.
Okay.
Mia, if you can clarify, or Brian, if you understand that question.
I think I know what's going on, Mia. I think I know exactly what's going on. So real quick, I am going to see if I can do this. I'm going to bring this over. And I think that what we're looking for is if we did file type, engineer, or engineering, or developer, or developing, and I go minus sample. Actually, I'm going to put the word resume right here, and I'm going to say minus sample, minus samples of, and I'm going to let that run, and I'm going to see what that brings me back. That is interesting. Let's try this. Let's go not sample or samples of. All right, we still aren't coming back with resume tips though. So real quick, I'm going to get rid of, I'm going to go and I'm going to say, I'm going to go back to the beginning and I'm going to look for a file type : doc. And I'm going to come back with how to write a resume. I don't care about writing a resume, so I'm going to get rid of how to as well. Okay, and there we go. We're starting to get some resumes that are coming back as documents. A visual resume. Man, these samples are crazy. Or visual. So we do, and let's also let's put in a location. I'm going to say that I'm looking for, Mia, can I say, Mia, you can't respond to me in real time. I'm just going to say Boston. So we've got a resume here for fullstack.net developer, on Tripod, on Jay Gilmore's personal website. We've got a CV of an experienced engineer, Purpose SAE International. So I'm going to put this string in the chat window. There we go. And we'll go from there. Mia, that was a really good question. I appreciate that. Any other questions that I can answer?
We've got quite a few. Jason first says, thanks a lot for putting him under the pressure of asking questions. So he says, how about a quick overview of a sourcing cadence? Where does one start?
Wow, a sourcing cadence. Where does one start? So, guys, this is Wow, Jay, that's a good place to get started. So where does one start with a sourcing cadence? So when you think about a cadence, the person, so I'm going to walk you through this, but what I would say the person that you really need to pay attention to the next time that they do a webinar on cadences is Michael Batman Cohen. So Michael does the very best cadences in marketing standpoint. He does them and he has the data to back it up, and he is not afraid to show you the data that goes with it. Okay. So
Cool.
if I was going to get started, I'd Google Michael Batman Cohen. There's only one Michael Batman Cohen. Number two, after kind of looking at what he does, what I would do to start my cadence is I would go and I would set up, I would go into Gmail. I'm going to go into Gmail. I'm going to compose a Gmail. I really would like to do Gmail. Okay. So let's just say that I'm going to send this message to Jason Singer at eHire. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set up the first email right here. It's going to say, Jason, what's your next leadership role? Jason, I'm going to type in a message. It's going to be highly personalized. When I say highly personalized, I'm going to say, I'm not going to say came across your LinkedIn profile. That is a turnoff. All right. What might make sense to have a conversation with Jason is noticed that you're an avid Dungeons and Dragons fan. Wondering, are you a 7th level mage? Why would I be looking for a mage? And then I'd go into it and explain, here at RentPath, we've got a group of developers or engineers that are actively focused on building great code and great software, and in their downtime, they play. Why is that on? Trying to figure out why somebody's trying to backdoor into my computer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of research on Jason to find out that he's an avid Dungeons and Dragons fan. For instance, if I go to linkedin.com, any Game of Thrones fans, I'm going to look for engineers or developers that are Khaleesi's. How do I spell Khaleesi? I need to find that real quick. Khaleesi. There we go. And I'm also going to say they have to know JavaScript. I've got 33 LinkedIn profiles of people who identify as Khaleesi, right? Oops, go away. I've got 33 people that identify as Khaleesi's on LinkedIn. Those are people that I can put into a cadence where I can talk to them about development and Game of Thrones. And I put an S on developer. Jason, you should say shame on me, and an S on engineer. Now I come back with 130. Also using the Khaleesi framework, Khaleesi of cyber recruiting. Yeah, so I've got some Khaleesi's that I can be having a conversation with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop them into that. And if I'm running an automated campaign, Jason, then that's one story. But if I'm running a manual campaign, what I can do is that I can set my timer to send off an email reminder to me, letting me know to reach out to that person in 3 days with the next part of my cadence. But that's doing things in a very manual capacity. If you're using a tool like Gem, or if you're using, actually, yeah, if you're using a tool like Gem, And I'm not trying to plug Gem here, but that's a great way for you to be able to develop your email cadence. Any other questions before I wrap us up? Because we've got about 9 minutes left, and I'm just going to go through Slack.
We do have a couple. I would like to let everyone know that in your chat box is a link to Jim's definitive guide to email outreach. It covers the data behind cadences. So there's some really good information in there as well. Would you like to take another question now, Brian, or would you like to go ahead and finish and then come back to the questions?
One more question I think would be great. What's everybody think? I'm sorry, I'm used to presenting in front of a room, so I'm kind of waiting for you guys to be like, yeah, do it. Okay.
It's a totally different dynamic, isn't it? But it's fun. It's a lot of fun. Okay, so we do have a question here asking for the link for LinkedIn.
The link for LinkedIn search engine?
Yes.
Give me 1 second and I'll pull that up and put it in the box.
Awesome, thank you. So that will go into the chat box, Letty. And I'll send it in your private messages as well.
Go, hold on 1 second.
And we have 2 other questions, Brian, when you're ready, but they can definitely, if we have time after the webinar, it might be better to address them then.
No, go for it. Let's fire it up.
Okay, all right.
All right, no, did you have those questions that you wanted to fire at me? And I did just go ahead and put the link to the LinkedIn search engine.
Okay, cool. I'll pass that along. Let's see, any suggestions on how to find cybersecurity engineers with a secret or top secret clearance? That's from Mike.
That's from Michael Vorman.
That's from, well, I don't want to give out.
That's awesome. I love it when friends of mine come on here and make me tap dance. Actually, I'm not really, I really don't have any advice on how to find security personnel. Like, if I want to learn how to do that, I mean, if I need to know how to do that, the person I'm resting on is I'm going to call my mentor, Steve Levy, and I'm going to say, Steve, you got to help a brother out. Or I'm going to reach out to Aaron, or to Aaron Matthews, or I'm going to reach out to a gentleman here in Atlanta named Corey Garner, who did that type of work for this little Amazon company. Good question, but you stumped me, Mike. I appreciate it.
Gotta love that. Okay, well, let's see what we can do. Dawson asks, how do you have time to do detailed and time-consuming sourcing with having a large rec load?
Okay, so my rec load is about 18 requisitions. So I don't know what your rec load is. I do not take phone calls on Monday. The only thing that I do on Monday from sunup when I get in the office until sunset when I go to pick my daughter up from daycare is source. So I do not do anything except for source that full day. I also do what I call corrective sourcing on Wednesday afternoon between 1 and 3 p.m. where if I'm not receiving the candidates that I wanted to see, I go back in and I tweak my strings so that I can do that outreach. But usually it's Monday and Wednesday for sourcing and for outreach, and then I spend Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday on the phones.
Thank you so much, Brian.
This is Wednesday. This is taking up my sourcing time. No, I'm kidding. That's typically how I do that. If you want, I'm more than happy to kind of share with you like my sourcing framework, like my for us to get together one-on-one. Email Ashley at the fall of the webinar, or send me a DM on Facebook because like Facebook is where I live. I do a tremendous amount of recruiting on Facebook, so yeah, I'm there. I mean, and it's free, right? Like you don't have to get hung up on LinkedIn, and I'm there with the messenger all the time. All right, so having said that, we've got 5 minutes left, and I was going to go through Slack. Are we running good on time, everybody? Oh man, I still think I'm in front of the room.
We're doing good. We have 5 minutes. Hurry, Brian.
Awesome.
All the
Hurry,
pressure.
Brian.
It's all
the pressure. All right, so Slack is something that I started sourcing on because Ronnie Bratcher dared me to do it about 5 years ago. And what I do is I find that you have to discover free or open Slack channels for you to be able to jump into. Those are going to be step one, finding the right Slack team. Step two, finding the channels that you want to have a conversation in. And then three, connecting with the people that you want to talk to. But what does this mean if you've never used Slack before? So I say that if you can use email, you can use Slack. If you can make a phone call, you can use Slack. If you can use AOL Instant Messenger, you can use Slack. If you can text, you can use Slack. What you want to jump into, and if we look at the left-hand side of the screen, there are different teams that you can go into. This particularly is one for Kubernetes that I was looking at because I am doing a Kubernetes search right now. This is for Kubernetes users. And so I went in and I found a team that was available, that was publicly available. And then I went from having a publicly available team to being involved in a group chat in one of the channels. And then I had conversations here in the channel, being able to click on these different profiles and pull up the profiles of individuals. It's a little bit easier when we kind of talk about what's going on here. So this is making WordPress work. This is a free and open Slack channel. There's some Slack channels that are closed, like the ones that you're probably using for your company, and then there are ones that are open. And if you go to one, and I'll show you how to find plenty of open ones, it'll show you those channels where there are different announcements that are being made, the direct messages that you send, and your login credentials. There's also a list that'll tell you how many people are online, and then there's what I refer to as the almighty search bar. Almighty search bar is pretty cool. One of the things that I like to do whenever I am in the midst of discovering a Slack community is go into the search bar and type in the word resume, and I'll show you why in just a second. But the way that I discover Slack communities are through two different websites. One is called Slowfile, and you can simply put in the team that you're looking for and it'll bring it back. If you're just kind of plugging around, it'll let you know up front which ones have the most members, how many different channels there are, how many admins there are, all those different pieces that go into it. Additionally, there's a website that's called Slack List that will organize, but doesn't have that search bar there, that will allow you to find different Slack channels ranked upon how they're performing in terms of how many members they have at any given time. Again, those are free and open Slack communities. But I want to go back to this search bar that I really prefer. I talked about this in the email in the 12th day of sourcing, and I think it got a little lost because what you can do is you can type in a name or a word, a name being the person you're looking for, a word, maybe Kubernetes, and it'll bring you back conversations that you've had with that person, or in the free channels, conversations that person's been involved in. But files, I like to type in the word resume, because if I type in the word resume, it'll bring me back files that contain the word resume. In this instance, I typed in the word Python, and it brought me up different Python scripts that were pulled from messages and then from files. And with 30 seconds left to go, I am ready for more questions.
Well, you have more questions.
Oh,
So
shit.
Rima says, on that note, Rima says, love you, Brian. You are so human and awesome. And then she said, do you prefer the search bar as a website or Slack channel? I think I have that right, Rima. If I misread your question, please clarify and I'll pass it along.
That's a great question. So I prefer the search bar. It lets me get to the meat of the subject much quicker, much faster. So if I type in something like, I'm looking for somebody who's using React hooks, it brings me back where they've had that conversation, or alternatively, it brings me back files that they have used that contain React hooks. Since those files are more than likely connected to publicly available GitHub repositories, I can click on the file, go to GitHub, share that GitHub profile with my hiring manager and say, I noticed this person in the Python or in the Kubernetes Slack channel, they're working with Kubernetes and Python. Is this person worth our time to have a conversation? And let them qualify the candidate based on that code before I ever try to reach out to them. Cool.
Cool. Well, we just hit the mark. It's 2 o'clock.
Okay, all right. Well, so real quick, I'd say, again, if you have any other questions and you want to connect, Facebook, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. What recruiter isn't on LinkedIn, right? You can also find me on GitHub, but I really don't answer questions there. And you can also find me on Facebook at the Brian Fink. And I really appreciate it, Ashley. I appreciate Joe making time for us and sponsoring this webinar and the 12 days of sourcing. And I look forward to coming back really soon.
Very soon. And first of all, we really appreciate you. This was fantastic. You covered everything so clearly, and I learned a lot. So that's great. So thank you so much for being here. Brian is going to be back next week on the 11th.
Oh shit, that's right. Yeah, I will be back on the 11th. So if you... I will be talking about optimizing your recruiting workflow.
Yep, how to hire 1,000 software engineers. And we're going to watch him do that live in an hour.
In an hour.
Right? Yeah.
we got to talk about Ryan about the clickbait that he creates sometimes, right? But it's all good. I'm looking forward to it.
We've tried. It doesn't work, Brian. We've tried. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you from the moon and back to Jim for making this possible. This has been such a fun campaign, and we do this every year. So for another 12 days of sourcing, make sure to check in with us next year around November. Sign up, and you will receive new tips, hacks, tricks. And we'll drag Brian in here again and make him go through each one of them live for you. So thank you so much, Brian. You have a wonderful, wonderful day. Everyone have a wonderful day and into your week. And if you have any questions, send them my way, ashley@recruitingdaily.com.
Awesome. Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.